Since LIANG was added to the game, the murderball that everyone should be using has completely shifted. So today, I will be discussing the best legendary commander murderball for all players. I will go over the top 7 marches currently, and then I'll give alternatives to every march. So it's nice and easy, depending on what your account has access to, depending on if they're mightiest governor commanders. All of this will be taken into account to help form your best Rise of Kingdoms murderball. So, what am I really basing this murderball off? And first, there's a few things. Number one is really the accessibility of a commander, because I'm not really trying to cater towards those mega whales who can just buy anything they really want from the mightiest governor, max buy things in the shop. I'm looking for them free-to-play players, those low spenders who really need the most optimized murderball that's kind of easy to access. I will discuss the whale pairs, but I will give the free-to-play alternatives. And I will also be taking into account, obviously, the relevance of the commanders, their investment, and if I think they're trading good in the open field. Now, we'll start off with the top 3 marches. And for your first 3 marches, your cavalry march, you'll be running a Nevsky and a Joan. We already know this combo, tried and true. It is extremely powerful. Nevsky is your primary. He's got the tank. He's got the power. And then Joan is your DPS secondary. She's got amazing DPS, and they're both very fast. So this is a very good hit and run city pop march. All of that, Nevsky Joan is a great combo. For your infantry march, there are 2 options. You can run a Guan CPO, which I think is the inferior option, but most players have access to Guan and CPO, so it's still a fairly good march. Some people say it's outpaced nowadays, and I tend to agree, but using it, it's still going to get fairly decent trades, and it's bringing you a lot of value with the Guan silence, and obviously CPO's health debuff. CPO is still an amazing commander. If you want to really optimize that though, you run a CPO Sargon or a Sargon CPO, depending on what you want, the support or the skill tree. And this is another extremely powerful march. Sargon, super tanky commander, just like CPO, they're both extremely tanky, and CPO's got the massive AoE damage, which Sargon doesn't have, plus Sargon's got an amazing debuff. With Guan, he's just really AoE damage, he's got a few attack stats, other than that, he's not too defensive, he's got a bit of march speed whenever he leaves battle, and he can cheese some healing factor off dead flags and stuff, but other than that, Guan Yu is pretty much just damage, so you'd only run him as the primary to get that extra damage factor on his active skill. And then for your third march, there are 2 options. You can run a Boudica with a YSG, since I know a lot of players have YSG, and that's certainly a very, very good march. The best march, though, is running Boudica with ZHUGE. ZHUGE is the new commander, he's the shiny commander, and his Wheel of Fortune, which is really good. So ZHUGE for Wheel is a great commander right now. If you are going to look for a very, very good investment, ZHUGE is the best commander at the moment, since we know there won't be any archers for quite a while, and he is extremely powerful. Boudica obviously being the primary because she is the best primary. But for the most part, you can still run Boudica YSG, Boudica Nebu, Boudica Ramses, all these archer commanders that worked with Boudica before still work now. Yes, they're not as amazing, but they're still going to be good. So if you have a Boudica Artemisia, you can still run that as well. And that would be your top 3 marches. For 4 marches, you're going to be running another Cav march, and you're still going to be running a Nevsky with a Joan. You will also still be running your infantry march, which will be a CPO with a Sargon or a Guan. And you will also still be running that Boudica with YSG, Tariq, or Artemisia. Then for your 4th march, I would bring in a Zhang Yu with a William. I think this is a really, really good combo. Zhang Yu will be a little bit outpaced when the new Cavs come out. That is something to keep in mind. So even just running a Minamoto with a William for you low spenders is a good option. If you have a Saladin with a William, that still somewhat works. It's not as good as a Zhang Yu with a William, but all these commanders are options. Zhang Yu, extremely fast rage cycle. Like, I really, really like Zhang Yu's rage cycle. He's also got a bunch of he's got a defense debuff. It doesn't stack with Nevsky's, but if his skill goes off first and then Nevsky's goes off after, you may still get an extra turn or 2 of value from his defense debuff. Also, Zhang Yu's just got a bunch of very, very high attack stats and damage, so he's a really, really good primary. He's also got the skill tree for what that's worth. And then William is giving you a bunch of buffs on his 4th skill. You only really need a William at 5551 to get almost all of his full value. So William is also another great commander. You could also run an XY Nevsky if you want that, and then a Joan with a William. That's also something else I've seen people do. I'm not sure if it's amazing, but I think it would work quite well in the field, and it's certainly an option if you want to split that Nevsky Joan if you find it being targeted a little bit too much, because it is a very high priority target. And for 5 marches, I would still be running a Boudica with a ZHUGE. At this point, you want to have ZHUGE in your murderball, so I think it's kind of time to like bench that Artemisia or YSG, unless you're going to just run a Boudica YSG. Could still work, but I think ZHUGE is bringing you a lot of value in your murderball. And then you're still going to be running that, preferably Nevsky with a Joan of Arc, Nevsky as the primary commander, and that Zhang Yu with the William, because that is just such a powerful combo, and William is bringing a lot to a murderball. Then for your 5th march, I think you kind of split your infantry at this point you want to get that Sargon, because Sargon is a really, really good commander. And you also probably want to get Tariq. I know a lot of people say Tariq is not a good investment because he is a rally commander. Eventually his damage will be outpaced. But for every commander, you could say that eventually their damage is going to be outpaced. So I think that Tariq, if you're running 5 marches, is pretty much a must-have. You could consider possibly maybe just going for a Harold with a Sargon or an Alex with a Sargon. And I've seen that work, but it's just nowhere near as close as powerful as a Tariq with a Sargon. So if you're running 5 marches, you'd split that and you'd run a Guan Yu with a Scipio Africanus, and then a Tariq with a Sargon. You could also run a Scipio with a Tariq, or you could run a Guan with a Sargon. I've seen that as well. That combination also works. Or you could run a Guan with a Tariq, and then a Scipio with a Sargon still, just like your first march. If you find that you really want the Sargon's debuff and he's getting targeted a lot, you put him with a Scipio, since that is a very, very tanky combo. And then if anyone hits that, it's basically going to take no damage. And it's a really, really powerful march with all the debuffs it's bringing. So very, very good idea if you are getting targeted a lot on your Sargon, just to put him with Scipio, and it's going to trade quite well. One thing to note, you could also consider Pakal and Harold if you currently have that available. I don't think it's worth actually going in and actively pushing for Pakal nowadays, but if you do have a Pakal or a Harold in your kit, then they are certainly very usable for your 5th march. Instead of getting like a Tariq, or maybe you don't have a Sargon, you just put the Harold and Pakal together, and that's going to be a very, very good march. Even Alex Harold still somewhat works nowadays. It's not amazing, but it's still an option, so if you are looking to run that as well, you could run that as your 5th march. Now, if you're running 6 marches, you're going to keep that Nevsky with a Joan, and then that XY with a William, or whichever 2 cav combos you're running. Then you're going to also keep your Guan Yu with Scipio. That's a good combo to have, especially when you're at 6 marches. The AoE silence on Guan is basically invaluable. And then you also really, really want to keep, at this point you have to have a Sargon, and preferably you have a Tariq or an Alex or a Harold to go with your Sargon. That's basically your 5 marches, and then for your 6 marches, and then for your 5th march you'll run, preferably at this point you want to run a Boudica with an Artemisia or YSG, and then you're going to get a Henry, and you're going to run a Henry with the ZHUGE. If you don't have access to Henry, possibly you don't have access to a Mightiest Governor, you could get Nebu. You may be thinking Nebu's Mightiest Governor as well, but Nebu is actually accessible from the legendary chests. He's also accessible from Heart's Desire, and I think he'll be coming to the daily bundle soon enough. I'm not sure when he'll come, but he should be the next commander in cycle for the daily bundle. So if you want to get Nebu from there as well, if you're watching the video once he's come out, definitely a good option. Now, there's a lot of mixing and matching you could do here. You could run Boudica Artemisia, like I said, Boudica YSG, Boudica Cyrus if you want the debuffs. I don't know if there's much to mix around with the Henry or the Nebu ZHUGE. I think that you definitely want to have ZHUGE at this point, and they're the 2 best options for you. You could also just stick with that Boudica and a ZHUGE, which is also a very good option, and then just grab like a Henry YSG, Henry Cyrus, Henry Nebu. All of these commanders work, since Henry is a very, very strong primary commander. Tanky stats. He doesn't really have the rage gain, which is something that I've noticed, which is why he has my Horn of Fury. So I think if you're going to run a Henry, you kind of need to have a Horn or some way to give him a little bit more rage, because it is something he's heavily lacking on. But I think Henry's ZHUGE is still really good, because hiding that ZHUGE behind your Henry makes A, Boudica less damaging if she does get taken out, and B, because Henry's very tanky, he tends to get hit a little bit later on, and when someone does hit him, your ZHUGE's AoE is still going to be getting value, since you're going to be able to attack them a lot more than if your Boudica got swarmed down, since she's a lot less tanky than your Henry. Now, for 7 marches, and this is really whale at this point, I think your best option is getting a Trajan. I've made a video on Trajan. I really like Trajan as a commander, especially beyond 7 marches, and then putting him with either an Ethelflaed or a Mulan. They're both gold key commanders, they're both really easy to access, and they both have some form of a relic. So if you choose Mulan, who I think is the stronger option, then you go in and get her double relic. She's extremely tanky. Like, that Trajan is going nowhere if someone hits it. She's got amazing buffs. She's got a rage reduction debuff on the opponent, which will stack with your Tariq. And if you're running in a Manatore for whatever reason, it will stack with her, and it will stack with your Nebu's rage reduction. So having her rage reduction is extremely powerful, and she's bringing you a lot of buffs. So having Mulan is a great option. I think she's the better one, but Ethelflaed's also a good option. She's got actually a fairly powerful AoE. It is quite underestimated how powerful it is, because she doesn't have a damage reduction on it. She's also got a massive debuff. So her debuff is one of the top debuffs in the whole game, and you could run her with your Trajan any day, and I think it's a good option. There is also one other thing to mention, and this is actually the secondary commanders, who I made a video on yesterday, and they work with almost any commander. That's the really good thing about them. So if you're missing the secondaries to any commanders I mentioned today, besides like maybe the ZHUGE, you really want to get ZHUGE, then you can run a Honda, a Caesar, or a Mehmed pretty much in the place of any of the secondaries I mentioned. So let's say you don't have a secondary to a Scipio, but you have a Scipio. Scipio Honda is great. Scipio Mehmed is great. Scipio Caesar is great. Those are options. If you don't have a William in your murderball, but you have a Zhang Yu Caesar is amazing. So that's a really, really good option for players as well who don't have a William. Possibly they don't want a William. They think he won't be very viable in the future. Or if you really want to run a William, but you don't have a Zhang Yu, you could run possibly a Caesar secondary because he's really fast and fairly tanky. Or you could run even a Mehmed secondary to a William. Or you could put a Nevsky with a Mehmed and a Joan with a William. So there's a lot of mixing and matching you could do with those secondaries as well. And you should really play that to your account. Also, if you have access to some other commanders that are a little bit outdated, maybe you've got a Ramses, but you don't have a Henry, your Ramses could be substituted to your Henry. Yes, he won't trade as good, but it's probably not worth you spending 690 extra gold heads to get a slightly better trade between your Ramses and your Henry. So getting a Ramses, if you already have one, and putting him with like your YSG and then running a Boudica with a ZHUGE is also still an option. So you also have to consider playing your account to your strengths and which commanders you currently have, since it's not always viable for you just to go out and get whichever new commanders there are. I would love to get every single commander that comes out instantly, but it's always difficult, and it's also difficult to make these videos and give a proper opinion because everyone's account is different. Now, if you want to talk about your account and ask me any questions about it, feel free to join the Archer Syndicate Discord, which will be linked in the pinned comment and the description below. Now, I do want to say I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.